Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Devy to Dynasty Film Room podcast hosted by the Matt Brothers. I'm your host, Matt Jackson, and with me as always, I've got my co-host, Matt Cooper.
What's up, guys?
And Matt Rupert.
How's it going?
Fellas, how are you guys doing this weekend? How was your weekend?
It was great. Chill. Much needed break from work.
You sound a whole lot better, so I'm glad you're starting to feel a little better.
Yeah. Last week was kind of rough to get through. Just take some congestion medicine before the show.
Yeah, pretty good on our end too. It's pretty chill weekend for me as well. My wife was out of town at a conference, but my parents came in to help with the girls, and I've mostly just been watching a lot of football. So ready to get to it.
I'm right there with you, man. My wife actually made us some game day football foods on Saturday, and we watched football all day. So it was a great weekend. I'm ready to.
That was a good day.
Get into it and talk some football. And boy, do we have some football to talk with you guys today. It was a jam-packed weekend full of exciting games, exciting playmakers. I'm ready to dive into it. And I say we go ahead and get started. So moving on, let's start with the college football side of things. There was a lot to talk about from a Devy aspect. But I'm going to start first with you, Cooper. Was there anything notes-wise or anything that jumped out to you guys or jumped out to you from the college football scene?
Yeah, so for the early slate, one thing that jumped off the page to me is Luther Burden. He looks like he's blossoming into a star wide receiver. So this is a guy that I had concerns about this offseason. I thought for a guy that's as highly drafted as he's been, as highly rated as he's been, because he was a 5-star recruit, has been considered pretty much consensus top 2 in his class, and a lot of people even still had him above Evan Stewart. I've been down on him because I said, look, last year he showed a lot of gadgety stuff. He returned some kicks. He got some rushing attempts. He scored touchdowns in a couple of different ways, but he really didn't show out a ton as a true wide receiver. But this year, he's racking up the targets. He's racking up the catches. He's catching it down the field. He's making plays everywhere. And he is answering a lot of the questions that I had about him with a resounding, yes, I can do it. Thank you very much. On the flip side, Barryon Brown has been disappointing me because he is another guy that is absolutely electric with the ball in his hands. But if you don't ever get the ball in your hands, I mean, it's an issue. So I think the most catches he's gotten a game so far is 4. This week he had 1 catch for 1 yard. To me, a guy who's not getting a lot of catches and not earning a lot of targets shows me that he's not separating consistently. So obviously I haven't had a chance to watch the All-22 yet. But I have concerns about Barryon Brown. Like, he's great with the ball in his hands, but you don't get don't get fantasy points for being a return specialist. So at some point, he's going to have to show me a whole lot more as a true wide receiver, especially with other guys in the class going off like they have been. He's kind of guys that I had him in a tier with this offseason are leaving him in the dust.
I mean, so he's good at returning the ball for touchdowns, but I mean, what else is he doing to get points? I mean, that's a great point.
Yeah, and I love Barryon Brown. I really want to see more out of him than what he's shown me to this point this season. Somebody who has shown me a ton is we've talked about these guys before, the Washington Trio. All right, Penix, Odunze, and Jalen McMillan, and you could add Jalen Polk in there, who also looks really good. Had over 100 yards this week. They're dominating. And I said last week, a game for me to watch was how are they going to do against a Big Ten defense? Maybe a step up in competition, although Michigan State looked terrible. So maybe it actually wasn't a step up in competition. I don't know. But I wanted to see how they'd look against a Power 5 school in Michigan State. And Penix had 375 yards and 4 touchdowns at halftime. These guys are killing it. Penix is an early Heisman candidate. He looks like he could contend for QB2 in the class, which I know is a really bold statement because it's felt for a long time like everybody had Drake May locked in there. And Drake May's looking a little iffy. He threw 2 pretty questionable interceptions in this one. So Drake May still is my QB2. Let me be clear about that. But I don't think that he's so locked in that it's his and nobody else can take it. I think the battle is pretty wide open. So Penix is really getting my attention as a 2024 quarterback, and Odunze, I think, is easily one of the best wide receivers in the draft class.
Yeah, we talked about it. Me and you text back and forth on a Saturday. For somebody that like Drake May that's arguably the QB2. Everybody's saying it, right? You need to see him do this versus lower level competition. You need to see him put up the stats, and he's just not doing what you expect him to do versus these lower level competition. Meanwhile, you got guys like Michael Penix versus, these higher level competitions that is putting up the stats. I mean, I think we can begin to maybe have that conversation a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, Drake May had over 400 yards passing. He threw 2 touchdowns, but the 2 picks were really bad ones. I mean, I was watching, and they were really terrible decisions. So that's 4 interceptions for him already this year. And, of course, last week against App State, he only threw for about 200 yards with no touchdowns in an overtime game against App State. So that's not what you want to see. So, yeah, he's not killing it. And we had questions about new offensive coordinator, no Josh Downs. How is he going to look? Is he going to keep putting up these video game numbers like he did last year? So far, the answer is no. And that doesn't mean that he's a bad draft prospect, but you want to see him at some point this year look dominant if you think he's going to be a top 5 draft pick. So
exactly. Well, speaking of quarterbacks and really teams that are struggling, I was left disappointed, just as you were with some of these teams. I was left disappointed with Penn State and Drew Allar. You talk about Drew Allar, I mean, arguably one of the top Devy assets in college football right now. I watched him play versus that Illinois football team, and probably one of his best competitions right now, biggest competitions that he's had up until this point of the season, and he didn't look that good. His ball placement was completely off. He was overthrowing guys. He had happy feet. I mean, he couldn't get his feet planted on some of his throws. I mean, he just didn't look good. The rushing attack couldn't get going. I mean, Nick Singleton finally got that touchdown and got that late, really good pass catching, down the sideline late in I think it was the 3rd or 4th quarter. So the rushing attack finally got it going, but that team as a whole looked pretty atrocious for most of that game. I mean, Illinois had them pretty much dead to rights for most of that game. And I mean, for somebody that's a high level Devy asset like Drew Allar is, I mean, I'm a little concerned with what I saw out of Drew Allar. So
yeah, and it was a good thing that Illinois is awful on offense, because it was like, well, we're not playing well, but they're even worse, so we're just going to cruise to a win. But yeah, it didn't look pretty, and they need to get him some wide receiver help at some point. So, I mean, they've got nobody this year, so hopefully next season through the transfer portal or something, they can get him some wide receiver help.
Absolutely. Speaking of wide receivers, though, that won't be available to help, but are a good wide receiver. Can we talk about Malik Neighbor, that LSU offense, for a second? Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors looked phenomenal on Saturday. I mean, Daniels had an 88% completion percentage. He was pretty much putting the ball wherever he wanted to put it. He was up there on the record books for most completion percentage, but almost had most passes completed in a single game. Tied up there with Joe Burrow. Neighbors had 13 catches for 239 yards, 2 touchdowns. The dude was getting it done all over the field as a pass catcher. He was going down the field, making plays, winning the contested catches. I mean, me and you were texting back and forth about it, Cooper. I mean, you were playing against him on Saturday, and it feels like every time we were texting, it was like, oh, Malik Neighbors did something again. I mean, this is a guy that his stock is up right now. I mean, it's soaring through the roof.
Yeah, I was playing against him in a C2C league, and at halftime I was like, okay, he can chill out now. Like, he's done enough. But, yeah, 239 yards and 2 touchdowns is insane. He definitely staked his claim for wide receiver 2 in the class, which is a wide-open competition at this point. There's a lot of good guys competing for it. He's an excellent route runner. I'm a big fan of Malik Neighbors. As for Jaden Daniels, not sure that I'm buying in on him yet as an NFL prospect. I think his legs make him really great for college production, but he hasn't shown me enough as a passer. And even this season, like, he looked great this week, but if you go and watch the tape against FSU, he looked terrible. So I'm not in on Jaden Daniels as a Devy prospect, but I love Malik Neighbors. And this 2024 wide receiver class is looking really good between Odunze and Neighbors and Troy Franklin. Just Marvin a lot Harrison. Of guys balling out. And, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. is who he is. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of guys that you are high on, we're going to move on to our stock up and stock down from a Devy aspect point of view. Give me a stock up guy after watching football on Saturday.
Yeah, Trevor Etienne. He looked fantastic. he's shown flashes of it before. Like he's got really good footwork. He's really shifty. His vision is good. I think he's got a better lateral agility than his brother Travis. Travis has more straight line speed, but this week is the first time we've really seen him take a huge workload because he's a small guy. He's splitting work with Montrell Johnson. And so that's kind of been the question is can he carry a workload? And this week he took 23 carries. He went for 172 yards and a touchdown. And he looked phenomenal doing it, just busting off huge explosive plays. So Trevor Etienne is a stock up for me in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, I loved everything I saw out of Trevor Etienne. I mean, his contact balance, his lateral agility. I mean, just everything that I watched about him, I loved. I know you mentioned it earlier. You don't like him, but Jaden Daniels is a stock up guy for me after that game. I think it's hard to argue him not being a stock up guy. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that goes, top half of the first round in the NFL draft, but in a class where you've got two quarterbacks that are going 1 and 2, and then it's up for debate who that QB3 is. I think Jaden Daniels can stake his claim as maybe being that guy that could potentially go as a QB3, QB4. I like Jaden Daniels, like I said. I mean, his rushing ability provides a unique asset that he can provide for an NFL team. He made all the throws that I wanted to see him make on Saturday. So he's somebody that I'm monitoring, and he's definitely a stock-up guy for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think if I was chasing that rushing upside in this class, I would probably lean towards KJ Jefferson personally. But I mean, it was a big game, obviously, for Daniels this week. I just need to see more before I bump him up. Right now, he's not. I don't think he's inside my top 10 quarterbacks in his draft class right now. So for me, a guy that's stocked down this week is Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen is. I don't know if you look at the box score. He had 98 yards and 2 touchdowns, and it looks like a pretty good game. He's still getting more receptions than he had last year. But it was most of the way through the third quarter against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern, not a good football team. No offense, Georgia Southern. He had 4 carries for 16 yards. And Ches Malusi, again, was out touching him. He looks like the clear 1A in that offense, which nobody expected. And Braylon Allen he looks slow. He doesn't look like he has lateral agility. And so for a guy who is as highly touted as Braylon Allen is, like widely considered a consensus top 3 or 4 running back in this draft class, I have not been impressed with him. And we got 3 weeks in a row now where we're well into the second half and he's done nothing. And then he's had a couple of games where he put up some garbage time points. But, yeah, I'm stocked down on Braylon Allen. I'm concerned about him.
He runs upright, and for me, that just bothers me for some reason. I don't like my running backs to run upright. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, his big selling point is his size, and he doesn't use it well. He doesn't have good contact balance for being a big train. What
I did learn Saturday, though, is if you want a guy in college football on your Devy roster to explode, you need to get Matt Cooper to tweet about him. That's what I
because I tweeted, I said, if you're not, it's 4 carries for 16 yards. I said, if you're not concerned about Braylon Allen at this point, then you're just kidding yourself. And as soon as I tweeted that, he scored a touchdown on the next drive. And by the end of the game, he had 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. So
yeah, it's magic.
But I think, honestly, like people who are just looking at box scores are not concerned about Braylon at all. And so I think there's still a sell window there. And he's a guy that I would be looking to sell.
For sure. One stock down guy that I already mentioned is Drew Aller. For somebody that has got such a high Devy stock right now, I want to go and get something for Drew Aller. I mean, I've watched enough of him the last 3 weeks now. I mean, his arm talent is there. You can see how he throws the ball with velocity. He has zip on his ball, but his ball placement, his accuracy, is just all over the place at times. His footwork is off. There's just some stuff about Drew Aller that I don't think translates well to an NFL roster. And if you can get what I believe you can get for Drew Aller, he's a sell for me.
All right. Well, let's move on to the NFL because we have a lot to talk about on that side.
For sure. Talk about the NFL. I mean, there were a lot of big games this week between, you had Kansas City and Jacksonville. You had the Ravens and the Bengals. I mean, when you look at this slate of games, what big storylines jumped out to you guys? I'll start with you, Rupert.
Yeah, I got to catch the Titans and Chargers game, and Keenan Allen just popped off. Like every time he was making catches, he was getting huge separation. He looked like he was 24 again, and everyone just like underrates him every single year, and especially like the last 2 years, like you could barely sell him in Dynasty, but he's just been a great like buy if you're a contender, and that's still true this year. If you're looking to contend and you need someone to go by to help you out at wide receiver, go get Keenan Allen. He looked phenomenal. Still the clear-cut number one. QJ is not taking that from him, and neither is Mike Williams. Keenan Allen's the number one for the Chargers.
Hey,
What
QJ
also
can
really
even take wide receiver 3 from Josh Palmer. So
yeah, Josh Palmer actually looked pretty good though. I will give him that. I was Josh Palmer hater last year, but he looked pretty good today. But the thing that really stuck out the most from that game was just how Mike Vrabel just completely outcoached Staley, and it just seems more and more apparent like every week that Staley is holding back the Chargers, and he needs to go for Justin Herbert's sake.
For sure. What about you, Cooper? What stuck out to you about this slate of games?
yeah, so the Texans stuck out to me. Obviously, they lost the game, but Stroud looks like the real deal. I mean, in your second NFL game to throw for almost 400 yards passing, and a couple of his young weapons, Tank Dell and Nico Collins, both look like very good young players.
What's good,
Tank Dell had 10 targets this week. Nico Collins had 9 and 11 targets last week, so he's averaging 10 targets a game. He had a monster performance, and these guys look like they're going to be people that you can feel good about putting in your lineup every week, which I did not. I mean, nobody thought that. They were guys you could get practically for free at the end of your drafts, both Nico and Tank Dell, and they both look like really good young wide receivers. So Stroud, he's been my QB1 even over Richardson, even when that became really unpopular. And obviously Richardson looks fantastic too, so I'm not taking a victory lap there, but I'm just saying Stroud has been my QB1 throughout the process, and he looked fantastic this week. So that was one of my observations. And then I'll go to a different game. I got to give Puka Nacua his flowers, all right? This is somebody that if you've been following this channel, I did a bunch of short videos leading up to the draft, like 30 seconds, just what you need to know about every prospect. And on Puka Nacua, I basically just said, just don't draft him. He was my wide receiver 23 in the class. Like, I was very, very wrong on Puka Nacua. In my defense, I could not find hardly any tape on him. And what I did see, it was against a low-level competition. But he's a guy that he's not very fast. He doesn't look very athletic. And he's not breaking ankles as a route runner. So nothing that he does looks spectacular. But he just settles into the soft spots in the zone. He catches a lot of these short passes, but he gets open enough to earn targets. That's what you're seeing. Like 2 weeks in a row, over 15 targets. That's insane as a rookie. And so the last guy that fit that description for me of being, he looks slow, nothing he does looks that amazing, but he's just racking up targets, it was Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we've seen what he's become. And so I'm trying to correct that mistake. I missed out on a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I even said sell him early on. I was wrong about Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm going to change my tune quick on Puka Nacua, and he's quickly becoming a buy for me. I think he could be a case where an overpay today is an underpay tomorrow. Like, I think a lot of people, even right now, even after the 2 games that he's had, if you go send out a first-round pick for him, they're going to call you crazy. And I think a year from now, a first-round pick could look like an absolute steal. So
I'm just glad that I have him on my Scott Fishbowl roster. I picked him up in the very last round of the draft, and he's been racking me up like 30 points every week, and it's been fantastic.
One thing I'll note,
you beat the waiver run.
One thing I'll note from watching Puka, like you said, he's not uber athletic, but it seems like he has everything up and between the ears, and then also like he's not electric in and out of his cuts, but he's so efficient with his footwork, so he makes up for a little bit of lack of athleticism. So that's something that seems like is going to make him like a good player for a very long time.
And he's strong after the catch too. And they're using him all over the field. He's not just in the slot. So a lot of people are worried what's going to happen when Cooper Kupp comes back. But at least in week 1, he was less than 30% of his routes came out of the slot. So he's actually playing more of a Robert Woods type role for the Rams right now. And I think when Kupp comes back, obviously, like, that's a lot of targets going to Cooper Kupp. He's probably not going to be seeing 15-plus targets every game, but he's still going to be very, very involved. And he just looks like a really good young player. So
what he's doing right now is he's earning his targets. Even when Cooper Kupp comes back, he's earned the right to get targets. So,
and Stafford looks phenomenal. So there will be plenty of passes every week to go between Kupp and Puka. So I'm pretty excited about that offense. So it was a big test today against 49ers, and I feel like they passed with flying colors, even though they didn't get the win.
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you one thing that jumped out to me, and it was the biggest thing, is there's still lots of teams right now that need to knock off some rust. I'm looking at my Eagles. We're a 2-0 right now, but we're an ugly 2-0. You know what I mean? Like, both of those games we should have lost. If Kayshon Boutte catches the pass on the sideline, that's a game lost against the Patriots. If Minnesota, doesn't turn the ball over 4 times and still only lose by 6 points, we lose that game as well. I mean, we've been playing bad. The Bengals, Joe Burrow hasn't looked great this season either. I mean, there's so much rust to knock off some of these teams. I mean, even watching the Chiefs game, I mean, Patrick Mahomes didn't look phenomenal until the second half. So, I mean, a lot of these teams just have some rust to knock off. I mean, that's probably my biggest takeaway from this week. Another one, moving on, and I know that Cooper won't like this, but DeAndre Swift needs to get more than 1 carry per game. I think he's proven that. I think he's easily the best back on the roster. I mean, he's the most athletic. He's the most explosive. And, I mean, if Jalen Hurts cannot vulture some of his 1-yard carry touchdowns away, I mean, you're looking at a guy that that explodes last week, and he already did. So, I mean,
he did explode. Swift, and I don't have anything against DeAndre Swift. I'm just putting that out there. But I am going to be a little bit of a wet blanket and say that when Boston Scott got touches, he looked really good too. And so I think a lot of us, oh, look how amazing DeAndre Swift looked. He's so explosive. He's so good. The Vikings couldn't stop a nosebleed in the run game. Their interior defensive line was awful. Every time they handed it off, didn't matter who the running back was. It's like, here's 7 yards, here's 8 yards, here's 10 yards. So I think as much as people are going to hate it, as soon as Kenneth Gainwell gets healthy, he's going to be involved again. And everybody's going to be mad and everybody's going to be on Twitter. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Kenneth Gainwell is going to be involved. I'm not saying that Swift is going to go back to 1 carry, but I don't think you're going to see him be a bell cow like he was this week. And so I would consider selling with the way that the hype is for him right now. I think it's going to be a committee. I think Kenneth Gainwell is a pretty solid player. And I think he's getting a little bit overinflated in his value right now just based off of a putrid Minnesota Vikings run defense. So
moving on there while we're there, I mean, why don't you go ahead and tell us your buys and sells while we're at it?
Yeah, so I'm going to say buy Tajay Spears. And the reason I say that, he's on the field a ton. We saw last week he had more snaps actually than Derrick Henry. He's in for every passing down. And when he does get the ball, he looks really, really good. He looked great in the preseason. He's looked good through 2 weeks, but it hasn't shown up in the box score yet. And so I think there's still a buy window where people are like, oh, this guy, he's barely involved, But I think Tajay Spears is going to be a flex-worthy play this year, and long-term, he's the answer for the Titans. And so I think you could still get him for relatively cheap. I would send a second-round pick for Tajay Spears and see if that gets it done. And I think you could get that done in a lot of leagues. So I'm buying Tajay Spears right now before he blows up, before it's too late. He looks really good. And as far as a sell, I'm just going to say this could be your one chance to get something for Baker Mayfield. Run, don't walk to do so, okay? Baker Mayfield, it is proven over a long career, he is a scrub. He's bad. Do not buy in that, oh, maybe this is the fresh start that he needed. Baker Mayfield is bad at football. And
plant the flag at midfield.
If you can go get a second-round pick from a contending team for Baker Mayfield, do it. This might be your last shot. Get him off your roster. Get value while you still can. Sell Baker Mayfield, please.
What about you, Rupert? Buys and sells?
Spears was a big buy for me, having watched the whole Titans game today. Just to kind of hit off what Cooper said, like he made some runs today. He made an 11-yard run that, doesn't look, too impressive in the box score, but he made it looked like the play was like dead in the backfield, and he made 3 people miss and then got 11 yards. It's just he looks like the future to me for that backfield. The other buy for me is Luke Musgraves. He was really overshadowed all offseason really by, the Kincaid, Laporta, and Mayer. But man, he looks good. What I like to look for on film out of tight ends is how fluid are they moving for large guys. And man, he just moves effortlessly, turning upfield, run after the catch. It looks like he's going to be a real weapon for Green Bay. So I would go ahead and buy him, even maybe overpay a little bit now so that you can get him on your roster, because he's already showing out in the first 2 weeks, and it's pretty notorious that tight ends take a long time to develop. So I think year 2, 3 for Musgrave is going to be huge.
And he hasn't done anything huge in the box score yet. If I'm not mistaken, he had like 2 catches for 25 yards today. Last week, he had 2 plays that easily could have been touchdowns, but it was just a miss by Jordan Love. So he didn't do anything great in the box score last week either. So I think this is a guy similar to Tajay Spears where you can still buy him, because it's not like he's Puka Nacua. He's over 100 yards, 2 straight weeks.
Yeah.
Like Puka Nacua is going to be hard to buy right now. Even if you overpay, the other managers is going to be afraid of, what if I'm giving up the next Amon-Ra St. Brown? So, but Luke Musgrave is somebody like Tajay Spears that hasn't gotten all the hype yet. So I think that's a great buy.
And then my sell would be Josh Reynolds. I will admit, I thought he looked pretty good, but it just seems like, he's kind of been around forever, never really popped off as a, great fantasy asset. So coming after a 2-touchdown game and the Lions offense seemingly humming, if you can go ahead and sell him if you got him on your roster and get whatever you can, because I feel like he's going to be limited quite a bit once JMO gets back.
So would you send like Josh Reynolds for a third?
Easy. Yeah.
I think that's a deal you can get done in a lot of cases. Go to a contending team that needs a little bit of depth. Say, hey, I'll give you a third for Josh Reynolds.
Yeah,
I think a lot of teams would take that.
Yeah, I think for sure. For me, my buy, and you guys might think differently about this. Well, my buy, if you're a contending team, is Mike Evans. I know you just said to sell Baker Mayfield, but one of the benefactors of that offense has been Mike Evans. I mean, dude has exploded the last 2 games. Him and his chemistry with Baker Mayfield has been through the roof. I mean, this might be Mike Evans' best season that he's ever had. And he, for a guy that is getting up there in age, he shouldn't be too expensive to get. If you look like you might be contending, he's somebody that I would go out there and buy right now.
Yeah, I think he did look great, and he's a good player. We know this. I mean, he's been dominating for a long, long time, and you do get that old man discount on him in a dynasty league. So I don't think that's a bad contender buy at all. But on the flip side, I'm going to say all offseason, you could not even pay somebody to take him from you. I mean, he was impossible to sell. And so if you're not in the top 3 in your league, like bona fide, legit contender, you got to sell him right now off of this huge game, because this might be the last chance that you ever get. People just don't like buying these old guys, and you got to take advantage of these huge games to sell them. But I think for a contender, you're absolutely right, Matt Jackson.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point on sell as well. Another one of my buy, I'm kind of cheating a little bit. I'm not playing by the rules of the game. I've got 2 buys instead of a buy and a sell, but y'all just bear with me. Another buy, Jahmyr Gibbs for me. David Montgomery goes down with the injury today. Jahmyr Gibbs only had 7 carries today. This will be the last game that he only touches the ball 7 times on the ground. And everything that I've seen about Jahmyr Gibbs, he's the more explosive back compared to David Montgomery. No one's going to argue that. I think you can take advantage of managers that are frustrated with what they're getting from Jahmyr Gibbs right now. It's still going to cost you. He's still going to be an expensive get because they know what they have in him. But he's somebody that I think, what you said, Cooper, an overpay today is going to be an underpay tomorrow, and that's what I think you're going to get with Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask is what would you pay for him? Because I don't think this is a buy low. I mean, I think he's 12th pick in the draft. People took him probably 102 in one quarterback.
Yeah.
At the latest, they probably got him 105 in a super flex league. They're not going to sell him for cheap. And I think most people, they're not blind. They're going to see that David Montgomery's hurt. So you're not getting him for cheap. This isn't a buy low. What would you pay for him?
I still think you could pay obviously you're going to have to pay a first plus, right? Because that's what the cost was in the draft when you got him. So I'm thinking, I'm just off the top of my head, a guy like, a first plus an old guy like maybe a Keenan Allen or like maybe somebody like that, where I think that, your time is limited with him with what you're going to get on that return of investment. I think I'd be fine making that deal with what you can get out of a Jahmyr Gibbs for a couple years down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I would not send Gibbs for that unless I knew that first was going to be relatively high. Like if I think it's a top 4 pick and I get a Keenan Allen on top, sure, I'm going to give that some consideration. But if you're telling me that it's like a back half first round pick plus Keenan Allen for Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm sending you packing. I'm like replying to your trade offer with a get out of here GIF. So yes, I say GIF, not GIF.
Yeah.
But sorry, that's just me. So anyway, I love Gibbs. I would buy if you could actually buy for that price that you just said, I would buy too. I don't know that you're going to get that done in a lot of leagues.
Yeah. Well, speaking of trade reviews, one that we did have get sent into us that I wanted to bring up was a Devy for an NFL trade. And that's something that I said at the beginning of the show that we were going to bring up as we got them in this show. So what do you guys think about Cade Klubnik for Joshua Kelly? Austin Eckler was out today. Kelly played. Didn't look fantastic by any stretch of the imagination. Would you guys prefer Cade Klubnik or Joshua Kelly? I'll start with you, Cooper, since you obviously have the experience with both players.
Yeah, Cade Klubnik, you're talking about a highly rated quarterback recruit who has had some moments where he's looked terrible, but he's also had some moments where he looked really good. I'll take the mystery box. I'm not super high on Cade Klubnik, but we know Josh Kelly is a scrub. He had played like one today. So, I mean, you thought, oh, Austin Eckler's out. Perfect chance to start Joshua Kelly. And he doesn't even give you 5 fantasy points. I know the Titans had a tough defense, but yeah, I think last week was a fluke where he goes off for a bunch of yards and a touchdown, and everybody got all excited about Josh Kelly, but we've known what he is for years. He's not good. So give me the shot on Cade Klubnik, and at least that could turn into something that I can use.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, especially in super flex leagues. I mean, the quarterback is always going to hold value for a longer period of time. You know what you have in Joshua Kelly in this garbage. I'm right with you. I'm taking the mystery box and Cade Klubnik for sure.
Same. Yeah. Unless like you're a contender and you have Eckler on your team, that'd be the only way where I'd keep Kelly in that situation.
For sure. Well, guys, that about wraps us up for this episode of Devy to Dynasty Film Room Podcast. Before we sign off, you guys want to tell the viewers where they can find you on Twitter and give them one game that you're excited for to watch this coming weekend. We'll start with you, Cooper.
Yeah, so you can find me at Devy2Dynasty FR, the number 2, not TO. And that's also the YouTube channel. So youtube.com/@Devy2DynastyFR if you're listening on Apple. One game that I'm excited to watch is UCLA versus Utah next week. It's always nice to see Pac-12 teams playing while I'm actually awake. So that's a 3:30 game. And I love Dante Moore. I'm a huge Dante Moore truther. This is going to be his first big test against a tough Utah defense. I want to see what he looks like in that game. So that's one that I'm excited for.
Great game to watch if you got the chance to watch that game. What about you, Rupert?
Yeah, you can find me at Matthew Rupert FF on Twitter or X, whatever they call it now. I still don't understand that, but yeah, game I'm looking forward to. Hopefully, Colts versus the Ravens. Let's say hopefully Anthony Richardson is cleared from his concussion today. That'd just be such a dynamic matchup with Richardson versus Lamar. It'd just be a blast to watch. So that's the game I'm looking forward to next week. Fingers crossed we actually get it.
You guys can find me on Twitter at Devy Matt. One game I'm looking forward to watching: Ohio State versus Notre Dame. I'm looking forward to see if McCord can get it done versus actual competition. He's had some kind of toss-up freebie games the last few weeks. I want to see what he does versus Notre Dame. I'm excited for that game. I'm not just because I'm an Ohio State fan, because I want to see what McCord does versus that team. My guys, that'll be
Devy assets all over both sides of the field on that one, so you can't go wrong watching that game.
For sure. Well, guys, that'll about do us for today. Make sure to like the podcast, leave a rate and review on Apple Podcast, as well as leave a comment. Check us out. Subscribe to the YouTube page at Devy to Dynasty Film Room. And until then, we will see you guys next time.
See you guys.
Peace.